everybody. My name is Gracie Ambern. I'm an intern here at the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War, and today I'm joined by a familiar face. If you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Bill Connor. I'm a retired Master Sergeant from the Air Force and the Air National Guard, and I currently still serve in a civilian capacity as the Military and Family Readiness Manager at McGhee Tyson National Guard Base.
Awesome. So Dr. Macker, I believe, interviewed Mr. Connor, 2023 maybe? It's been a couple of years, and we're here today to do a follow-up interview and just chat and see how you're doing, how things have gone for you, what you've been up to since the interview, and then just other fun things that we didn't maybe get to talk about in the first interview. So I guess that's where I'll start is what have you been up to in these past 2 years?
The job, I was telling him in the hall, I've got the best job in the Air Force. I'll tell anybody that. My job is Military and Family Readiness Manager. So I tell people it's kind of a cross between a resource advisor and a life coach and a good person to have a cup of coffee with. And the whole focus of the job is to keep military members and their family members as squared away in all aspects of their life, because it's like any other part of resiliency where if all these parts of your life are doing better, this part's going to be doing better. So if I can help keep these parts of your life better, you're going to be able to do a better job for the Air Force. And so every day, whatever comes through the door is always different. The situations are different. I get to build a lot of great relationships on the base, and I really do love the job. So it's still as good as it was the last time I came out here. Our base is wonderful. I'm with the 134th Air Refueling Wing right here in Knoxville. And we do a great job, and we've got great folks. So it always makes a good day for me to go to work. But,
that's awesome. Yeah. That's so exciting. So what is your typical, this is just out of curiosity, what does your typical day look like in that position?
It's very strange, and it's hard for people to understand sometimes, because my day can start with I'm planning for an Easter egg hunt for our kids to come out and find Easter eggs, and the day can end with helping find somebody the proper resources so that they're not going to go into bankruptcy, or I may be finding them some type of counseling because they want to work on their marriage or work on some of the stresses that come with a deployment or their day-to-day lives. So it can be kind of fluffy and fun and can get very serious very quick. But the main thing is just to keep the lines of communication open so people know there's always a place to start to find those solutions, to find those answers that they need.
That's awesome. I would imagine that position kind of gives you a little bit of, emotional whiplash. Do you feel like you thrive in that, of being able to have that balance, or do you find that it can be difficult, or maybe sometimes it depends on the day?
I wish more people knew what you just asked, because one of the things that I learned very quickly in the job is that when somebody does decide they trust you and they bring you that problem, they bring all of that problem. And it's very hard to not take that in, and you feel it when you go home at the end of the day. Whatever they were feeling bad about, you feel bad for them. And so you have to learn very quickly, not necessarily put up a barrier, but you have to stay focused on, you're not there for the emotional part. You're there to help them find an answer. So you're listening, you're taking it all in, but that emotional roller coaster is no joke. You can sometimes go home and just think, oh my gosh, I can't complain about any part of my day after hearing what their day just looked like. And you do have to learn to treat it not like this. Take the information, work on a solution, try to make it better for them, and try not to get too deep in it, because it can be a little overwhelming. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So were there any positions that existed while you were actively in the service that are kind of mirroring or similar to the position that you currently serve? And I guess to that, how do you feel like your service is helping you kind of take on that role, if that makes sense?
I think the biggest thing I did was just get old. The experiences that come along the way. When a young airman comes to me now, it's not too big a stretch for me to remember something that I went through while I was in. To answer the first part of your question, yes, if you're on an active duty military base, there's an entire center that focuses on soldiers' wellness or airman wellness. So you can go to a department and talk about finances, or you can go to a department and talk about counseling. On an Air National Guard base, it's a lot smaller operation. So my my function is a lot smaller as well. But a lot of times it is a matter of just being empathetic, remembering similar situations, or because these people typically are in their 20s, I've got children in their 20s. So sometimes just the way that I would talk to a military member, I'm talking to them the way I would talk to one of my own children, and just kind of being a professional, but also kind of giving them a little fatherly advice sometimes, just really being vested in wherever their situation's taking them, and just trying to understand where they're coming from.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very admirable position that you kind of work. I think that's, from what I've seen and heard, I feel like historically things like that have not always been prioritized in the military. And so to see that is becoming a larger emphasis as time passes, I think it's very admirable. I'm sure it's very difficult work, but.
Well, it can be difficult. It does have its moments, but I would say the pluses far outweigh the minuses. When you build relationships to where people feel comfortable bringing a problem to you. Because you think of what that's like. If you've got something going on in your life, the idea of going to a complete stranger to talk about it, most people don't want to do that. So I work very hard to build relationships so that when they do come to see me, it's not the first time they're coming to see me. So I spend a lot of time training in resiliency and mindfulness and life coaching, and even just developmental things like I do classes on public speaking. I do classes on giving and receiving feedback. So if I go to that office and I talk to this group of people, then the next time when they do need something, it's like, oh, I remember that guy. Yeah. We did his class that day. I know that guy. I can go talk to him. So once you feel like you've built those relationships, that's when you start to feel like you're making that difference and being helpful. Yeah, it's
awesome.
And it does feel pretty good at the end of the day.
No,
I think
there really is no feeling like helping other people.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like anybody would agree with that. Yeah. Even though sometimes I do think we struggle to do it, I think that that is the best feeling that we can have. But okay, I'm so excited to talk about. So for the audience, when scheduling this follow-up interview, Dr. Magger let me know that I really needed to ask him about country music in the Air Force. I'm a pretty big country music fan, not like today's country music. I don't like anything on the radio, but real actual country music, I really like that. And so I just have to know, what's that about?
What is that about? So to go all the way back to the earliest days, when I joined the military, I walked into my recruiter's office and they said, what do you think you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know what you call it in the military, but Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam, that's the job that I want. And she was kind of surprised. She said, I've never signed up a broadcaster before. This would be really cool. So that was my job when I came in. And the other boxes that I wanted checked was I wanted to see the world, I wanted to get college paid for, and I wanted to be a broadcaster. So most people know if you join the military, there are a lot of great education benefits. Mm-hmm. And one of the benefits of being a broadcaster is your whole purpose of your job is to be overseas at foreign military bases, because you're going to be the English-speaking media for those members that are stationed overseas. So it checked all the boxes instantly. Yeah. And so in the morning, I would be the morning radio disc jockey, and in the evening, I'd be the TV news reporter, and it was as much fun as it sounds. It was great.
Awesome.
And the first award I ever won in the military was for a show I did on Saturday nights called The Dead Zone, and I played Grateful Dead music on Saturday nights, and that was my first military award.
Wow.
And I thought, all right, if I can be a deadhead in the Air Force and travel around the world, and you're going to pay for me to go to college,
come on.
This is sounding pretty good right now. And that was where the start came from. So we spent 2 years in Iceland, which was amazing. From there, we went to a little string of islands called the Azores, which if you look on a map, find Portugal, look out in the ocean, kind of like where you would be looking for Hawaii off the coast of California, off the coast of Portugal, there's a little string of islands called the Azores, and we have a base there. And it's 20 miles wide and 10 miles across, just a dot with a string of other islands around it. And I spent 2 years there as well. My wife and I both did. But like any place, when you're stationed at these different bases, your assignment runs out, you've got to go somewhere else. And I wanted to go to mainland Europe. We'd done the island thing for 4 years now. We wanted to go to the mainland, and there was nothing available. There was nothing available where we wanted to go. So started looking around, and there are military jobs that are called special duty assignments, and it's where you step out of your regular job and do something a little outside the box for a while. So when you see something about military basic training, those instructors, your BMT basic military training instructors, those guys are doing special duty assignments. They do that for a few years, they go somewhere else. Some people, they might go work at an embassy or work in the White House or something. Well, in this case, the Air Force recruiting headquarters had a special duty assignment for a broadcaster, and your job is to make radio and television commercials for recruiters. So, not to get too deep into the woods, but the reason why this is kind of important is every radio station has to do a certain amount of time that's dedicated to public service time. So instead of a commercial for a brand, you're doing something for a charity or you're doing something for a government agency. And you always want to come up with some cool hook to get your stuff played maybe a little more than the other guys. So in this case, you listen to a typical military commercial, and it's, if you want to find out about joining the Air Force, call 1-800 blah, 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 just a typical generic thing. So what we would do is say you're the new recruiter in town. You're going to be here in Knoxville. So you would call me and say, all right, I'm a new recruiter in town. Here's my list of radio stations. Here's the formats that they play. And I would go into a little studio, and instead of 1-800, it was, there's a new recruiter in town. Her name is Gracie. To find out more, call 865 whatever. Aim high with the Air Force, aim high with WTK. Well, you would take that to a radio station and they would flip. They just thought that was the coolest thing, to have this custom local product made just for them. And we would get a lot of free airtime because of that. So to take it one notch further and thank radio stations for that support, the Air Force would do a Christmas program every year that was called The Gift. And just like I'm sitting here talking to you, they would send me to Nashville, and I'd sit down with a country music star, and we would just talk about Christmas when they were growing up, and Christmas when they're trying to make it in the music business, and Christmas, because then we'd go into the studio, edit those interviews in with whatever songs off of their new Christmas album. There was usually a new Christmas album around, and we would make these radio shows, send them out to country music stations, and we would get millions of dollars worth of airplay at Christmas time. So it was ridiculously fun. I did one show with Randy Travis, one show with Clint Black, one show with Trisha Yearwood, and one show with Charlie Daniels. And each time it was in a fan maybe. So each time it was in a different place. The first one with Randy Travis, we went to Hollywood because he was making a movie, and they were shooting this movie in somebody's backyard. And we were supposed to go shoot the interview in the morning, and then he was going to make the movie all day. And we got there, and he comes out, we meet him, we're getting ready to set up, and they walk up and went, Randy, I hate to do this to you. We're flipping the schedule, and we've got to get you on set right now. And we're just like, what do we do? And they said, what can you guys do? And we said, we can stay here as long as you like, but when we leave here today, we got to have this interview done. And they went, okay, it's going to be a long day. So we watched him make a movie all day. Wow. And we watched him on the set, and some really famous people were in the movie. And these might not be familiar to you, but Mickey Rooney played his boss, who's a Hollywood legend. If you've ever seen the movie Airplane, Julie Haggerty played his wife in the movie. Okay. And a guy named Dom DeLuise was the director. And he would come over and talk to us and make sure we were okay, and they were on a break. And he comes walking over, and we're looking at each other like, you've got to be kidding. John Voight had just stopped by. He was a friend of Dom DeLuise's and stopped by, and he was very pro-military. And he goes, hey, I want you to meet my friends. And so you leave these things thinking, we just watched them make a movie today.
Yeah. What movie was it?
It was called Boys Will Be Boys, and I think it was a made-for-TV movie, and it was about the dad that's too busy with work to take care of the kids. And he finally learns, he's got to be home for his family. And
classic.
Yeah, exactly. But so each one of those was very different. With Clint Black, we sat in a radio studio in California and did the interview. With Trisha Yearwood, we were in Nashville on Music Row at a studio, a great place called Spotland Studios, which is also where we produced the show. And then the one with Charlie Daniels, we did it at his house.
Oh, that's really cool.
And I'm sure he lives in Lebanon. And when you would drive down in his neighborhood, you would never know this was his house because he didn't live in that house. It looked like just anybody else's house, but that was his offices and where he kept the tour bus and all that kind of stuff. And just this very plain, normal garage in the back was his studio. And that was where we did that interview.
That's so cool.
So that's the immediate tie to country music, was doing those shows for the Air Force as part of being a disc jockey with recruiting headquarters and stuff. So that was as fun as it sounds. And you feel like a giddy little kid the first time you hear your show on the radio and you're talking to somebody like Clint Black, who's all these people were incredibly down to earth, very, very supportive of the military and made it fun. They were very cool to work with. So yeah, that's the tie that Dr. Magra was talking about.
Okay. Well, I probably have a million questions. Let me think where to start. Okay, for one, we'll start at the beginning, work our way back through it. We'll dissect it.
Yeah.
Broadcasting in the military. Is that like a position that still exists, and how competitive was that for you at the time? Is that like, I feel like that's if I was in the military, that's what I want to do.
Yes. And it's competitive in the sense that you take a voice audition, and if you pass the voice audition, then you get to go to the school to learn to do it. If you haven't been around the military, it probably wouldn't cross your mind. But, once you've gone through basic military training, the part that everybody's heard of, well, now you got to go learn how to do your job in the military. So any job that you've got in the military, you've got to go to a school to do it first. So we all had to pass the basic broadcaster's course. So you go and you spend time learning how to be on the radio, and you spend time learning how to be a news announcer on the radio, which is a whole different project set of skills. Then you would learn how television operations work, how to be a cameraman, learn how to run audio, learn how to do what they call CG, the character graphics across the bottom of the screen. You had to learn to be an anchor. You had to do all of these things in kind of a round table. And then you had to learn how to be a photojournalist, how to take a camera, go out, shoot a story, come back, write the story, voice it, edit it, and get it ready for the air. And at the time, it was about a 3 to 4 month course. And it's been morphed over the years. This was the early 90s, so it's morphed over the years. And so it was competitive in the sense that, assuming there was a job open in the military, you had to pass the voice audition to be able to go to school to learn how to do it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you say you were Good Morning Vietnam is really that's what inspired you to that's what I want to do.
Yeah, when I started thinking about the military, I thought, what in the world would be more fun than that? And I was right.
I absolutely
so
agree
much
with
fun.
You,
it was
sure.
so much fun.
I mean, I know all 8 minutes of American Pie by Don McLean. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? But so take me back to when you first, the first time you're actually working this position, you're overseas. You said Iceland is where you went first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you thinking of was it like that experience that you somewhat, I mean, obviously the circumstances are way different, but would you say that is kind of how you felt taking on that role?
Well, first you're kind of scared to death because you realize military training is the opposite of college. In college, you spend a lot of time learning the theory about how something works with very little hands-on. Mm-hmm. In the military, we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
You're going to learn how to do it. And over time, as you gain experience, you'll start to get now I know why we do that way. So we don't have time to talk about why you're doing it. Just do it. So when you get overseas, you have to be grown into the job. So in this particular detachment, you started in television board ops. And in those days, you had walls of VCRs, and you had, just like you've seen in movies and things, a huge board with a whole lot of buttons and a whole lot of things that do this. And your job is to get a day's programming ready, get the tapes queued up, make sure that everything goes on the air at the right time. In between, you have station identifications that have to run and all those things. You learn how to do that step by step by step until the first time they cut you loose on your own. You're the overnight TV guy and you're in the building all by yourself. Wow. And you're making sure TV stays on the air. And from there, you grow into either the radio operations or the news ops. And just like that, once you get into those jobs, now, once again, you're back at ground zero. Mm-hmm. You've got to be taught how each of these things work. And it's like anything else. At first, it's the most crazy, intimidating thing. And then after a while, it's just fun. Yeah. And it really is fun. And it's not that far off from what you've seen and would imagine in your head. I think about the biggest difference is when you're a military broadcaster, it's not like regular news. You're not there to gossip. You're not there to over sensationalize things. You're providing English speaking media. So our news stories that we would shoot would be about what's going on in the military on this base today. No expose stories or digging deep into bad stuff. You're just telling the stories of what's going on the base. And radio was kind of the same way. You didn't do anything inflammatory. You didn't do anything to make anybody mad. You're just there to provide information and play some good music. And that was it.
Yeah. And so you said you're a Deadhead.
Oh yeah,
of course. What other music do you like? Like what other genres? Both like did you like gravitate towards in the position, but just in general, like even now, like what music do you like?
Well, I think one of the things that doing the job allowed you to do was maybe at least appreciate music that you wouldn't listen to otherwise, because you have to remember you may be the only English-speaking radio station for that country in that area. And in the case of Iceland, right outside the base, you had Keflavik, Iceland. 30 minutes away, you had Reykjavik, Iceland. They could hear everything we were doing, but they weren't considered our audience. They were considered our shadow audience. Mm-hmm. So they would call up and ask for songs like you couldn't imagine. And that was part of the fun on an overnight shift, because you might be playing Soundgarden and then somebody wants to hear big band jazz music. And you're like, oh, if I can find it, I'll play it. And why not? So you start to get a feel for what they liked, what they didn't like, and you start to appreciate certain kinds of music maybe more than others. But, I was in college in the 80s, so I love MTV era 80s new wave music, and you could always find ways to work that in, because by the time I got to the military, that was considered oldies. But in my mind, oldies was music from the 60s and the 70s. Yeah. So my Friday show in Portugal, I was the morning disc jockey, and so Friday was called Jurassic Friday because we're digging up the old stuff, and we would play, no kidding, oldies music, and people loved that because that was music that maybe they hadn't heard in years and years. Yeah. So I don't know if I had a favorite as much as just trying to have that finger on the pulse of what you knew your audience wanted to hear and give them maybe that taste of home. So we had dedicated country music shows. We had one of our guys did a heavy metal show on Saturday nights, and he had his audience, and a lot of real news junkies. So in the evening, news was very important to make sure that we recorded NPR's All Things Considered, that we got a feed that was the most up to the date. How do I say this? We would play news at the top of every hour, but it was only like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. But in the evenings, we had a solid couple of hours of news programs, and you had people that really wanted to hear that part of the day. So whatever they wanted, really, that's what it was about. You had to remember, you're not, this isn't your jukebox. You're not here to play the music for you. You're here to play the music for them.
That's where I would go wrong.
Yeah. Well, and there was ways to do that, because the show would be programmed, and this is whatever show, country music, but there would be specific blocks where you could pick the music that went in there. So you and I could both be doing a country music show, but your show would sound a little more like you. My show would sound a little more like me. So it keeps everybody honest, but at the same time, everybody gets to put their personality to it also.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that is like the coolest thing. Like, every time I interview somebody, it's like, it's so cool that sometimes I can't even come up with questions because it's just like, wow. Like, that's just really, really cool. And then, okay, so I guess we should move on to the country music stars, a little bit more about that. So who came up with that idea? Did you come up with that, or was it presented to you? And if it was presented to you, what's your reaction to that?
No. Way before I got there, Air Force Recruiting used to do a TV show called Air Force Country Music Time. And that was almost like a syndicated radio show. So the person before me, and for many years before me, if you had this particular job, you would go to Nashville a couple of times a year for a couple of weeks, and you would do 30-minute radio shows with all the country music stars. And so there was a booking agent in Nashville that would book like back-to-back interviews for a solid week. And it was no joke. You would sit down and talk with this person, and then you would talk with this person, and then you would talk with this person, and you would do this for days. After the interviews are over, now you're going to spend another week or two in the studio working with an engineer and turning all of these into these shows. And so then a radio station would get a big box of CDs a couple of times a year with all of these shows recorded on it. So it used to be a more constant presence. When I got there, bummer, the year that I got there was the first year that they stopped doing the weekly shows, and it went to just that Christmas program. So that had been a mainstay of Air Force Recruiting's marketing for quite some time. And I was bummed I didn't get to do it all the time, but the Christmas shows were really cool.
Really special.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, when you're asked to do this, like, I'm sure you were really, really excited.
It was exciting because I genuinely liked all four of the people that I got to talk with. And it's like anything else. You're excited from a work standpoint, but then there's also that personal standpoint of like, I'm getting to sit down and talk with this person. So, It sounds crazy, but the first thing you have to do is get past that real quick, because this is work, and you've got to come in and be a professional and sit down, and you want to make it enjoyable. You want to make it relaxed, but these people are busy. You're paying for the time in the studio. So it's not goof off time. You structure out. We're going to have this opening. We're going to talk about this. We're going to get into this song. That song lasts 3 minutes. We're going to get back with this. We're going to talk about this. And we're going to trim that down to be 12 minutes. And then we're going to leave space for this. So your head is running like a clock. And in radio, they call it back timing. You're timing out how long this segment's going to be, how long this segment's going to be. And you think, I'm on top of this. And then you just, as you can imagine, you get into a great conversation that the window goes right out the window. And then you have to sit down and edit all this. The Randy Travis one was in someone's house. So you didn't get this feeling of like, we're super comfortable. It's, we gotta stay on top of this. We've got to get out of their house for the day. The one with Clint Black, very structured, because we were in the ABC radio studios in Burbank, California, and they gave us the time absolutely free. We didn't have to pay to be in the studio. Wow. Awesome. They helped set up a link so that while we were doing the interview, it was being recorded back in Nashville. So again, stay on top of it. I think the one that was kind of just the most wide open from a fun standpoint was the one with Trisha Yearwood, because that was in the studio where we were going to produce it. She is just as cool and just as sweet and down to earth as you would think she would be. She came by all by herself. There's no manager. There's no anybody with her. And we got all set up and ready to sit down. And the door opened up, and they said, guys, we need to ask a huge favor. And it was CMT. They needed to do this quick little audio bit that they had to get knocked out. And we're like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. And Vince Gill comes walking in, and then he's going to go record his piece. And we started to learn very quickly that as long as we were flexible, we could get a lot out of what was going on, because while we were in one studio doing our thing, there were, no kidding, country stars going to the studio right beside us, doing all kinds of things. So I started making sure I had a lot of Air Force public service announcements already written up. So when these people would come in, it's like, yeah, Vince, we don't mind if you get in the studio, and why don't you voice this while you're in there? And they're like, yeah, cool, happy to do it. And they would voice something for us.
Awesome.
And so, and then the one with Charlie Daniels, he was super comfortable, super relaxed. I mean, he'd been doing this for a million years, of course, but he was in his environment. It was in his studio. Yeah. So you want it to be comfortable. You want to have fun. You want them to enjoy it. But you do have to have in the back of your mind, this is work. You're not in there to be a fanboy that day. You're in there to get this job done.
That would be really hard for me.
But you would be surprised. Once you sit down and he says, hey, we're rolling, then this part of you kicks in. It's like, I want to do a good job. Because the last thing you want to do is listen to it later and go, that was stupid.
What is she saying? Like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Which sometimes I still do that.
Well, exactly.
I'll go back and watch these and I'm like, what?
Why did I say
What are you saying, girl?
The beauty of editing. The beauty of and the tricks that you can learn. One of the most fun experiences out of all of that had nothing to do with the stars, but the man who runs Spotland Studios, he's super laid back. He's just this great guy. His name is Ben Holland. We clicked immediately. We loved working together. And if you walked into his office, you would not know that he recorded country music stars, because he didn't do any of the buddy pictures to hang on the wall. There was no plaques on the walls. And because of that, when the stars would come in, they realized, okay, we can relax around here. These people are going to be really cool. And his mind was always running with like, what's the next thing we're going to do to make this a little better? And one day he was looking for some music because, he would have these bumpers, these intros and outros, to where getting ready to go on the commercial, when we come back, Charlie Daniels tells us about blah, 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 when the gift continues after this, and he'd want to put music under that. And he just was not happy with music because we had used all the best stuff before. And he said, wait, I've got this idea. So he goes in the other room and he comes back and just drops this box. And it's full of sleigh bells and tambourines and jingle bells and all this kind of stuff. So he put a microphone in between us, and running into one channel of the audio, he would just play some background music. And then he and I would sit there with the sleigh bells. So we just instantly turned any piece of music into Christmas music. Yeah. So when we got to the end of it and all the production notes on the back, it's, special thanks to this, special thanks to this. And then the very last line said, additional sleigh bells by Bernie Graham and Dexter Lake, which were DJ names that we had both used in another life. So we made sure that we got our sleigh bell credit in there too. And to this day, when I get it out, I get a bigger kick out of listening to the intros and the outros to the breaks than I get to listening to the rest of the show. But that's a minor story, but my point of that was that adds to that level of comfort to where you can make it enjoyable but still be professional while you're doing the job. And that's kind of the way you have to approach all those jobs, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you had to pick a favorite of all the interviews you did, who do you think, or maybe favorite is, let's not say anyone's not your favorite, maybe most memorable,
in the music, in this arena kind of thing. They were all really great for various reasons. Randy Travis was my country music hero. He was the reason I started listening to country music. Awesome. So to sit there with him, and it was the first one. So it's where you're just there thinking, I was sitting in some dude's house where they're making a movie, and I'm talking to Randy Travis. And even after you left, you just went, that was crazy.
How did that happen? That's so surreal. Yeah. That is awesome.
The one with Clint Black, he was such a heartfelt, serious guy. We would have to really work on him to get him to lighten up a little bit, because he would talk very seriously about how with them, Christmas is an odd time for them because they feel so fortunate and they have so much, and they're very mindful of people who had so little. And we would have to really work on him to turn this into hopeful stories instead of things that were kind of sad, because he was very, very serious about it. But he was wonderful. Trisha Yearwood was just fun. She was like just some neat person that you would meet to hang out with. And the Charlie Daniels one, he's very, very supportive. I keep talking about it, and most people know he passed away years ago, but doing the interview with him, extremely supportive of the military. And he would talk about traveling overseas with the USO and playing for troops and visiting troops. And he had great stories about that kind of stuff. And he would soapbox a little bit about how more people need to be supporting the military.
Yeah.
So that one was very heartfelt, kind of the bookends of the whole thing, being the last one talking to somebody who really loved the military that much. So I really can't pick a favorite. Each one was special for its own reasons, but I think probably out of the four, I think maybe the best sounding show was the one with Trisha Yearwood. That one, just the pieces, the way it fit, it's just really well done. And I don't mean it like I did it. I mean the engineer, Ben Holland, he did a wonderful job of making that into a really cool show. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Is that a good non-answer?
No, that was good. That was perfect. And do you have anything else that you were wanting to talk about or anything? I have one final question, but before we get to it, I just want to make sure I've given you space to, is there anything else that we've not touched on that you're...
I think in that respect, and talking about those shows, which that was, I mean, I was in the military for almost 26 years. That was a 4-year span. That's a very small part of what the overall picture has been about. But to me, it just serves as a reminder of work doesn't have to suck.
Yeah.
And I mean that really sincerely. There are so many people that just take on their life as, I have to do this. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm going to do. And maybe you just didn't ask the right question. I mean, I just asked, how do I get to do this job? Because this is what I want to do. And I had so much fun the whole time I was in. But that was almost a surreal kind of fun where you're doing something so far outside the box, you're just thinking, it still seems weird that I got to do something like that. So I tell people all the time, I think sometimes the people who seem to be the most successful people are just the people who ask questions, ask if I can do that. That looks fun. Can I try that? And I wish more people would do that, because I had so much fun all of my career, but especially those 4 years, just because I asked the questions, can I do that? So, yeah. That's awesome. Maybe that would be it.
That's great. Okay, well, my final question, it's not a super serious one, but I think it's a good one. If you could do one last interview, like today, with any, I would think country music star, but I mean, if you can't think of one, there's like another music star you'd prefer. I just want to know, who would you want to interview?
Dolly Parton.
Oh, well, that's like an easy, that should be everybody's answer.
But it goes way before being here. I don't know how you go down these paths of where you end up, but it seems very strange to me that when I was a child growing up, my mother used to tell everybody that Dolly Parton was my first girlfriend, because as a toddler, as a young kid, her voice when she was singing on the Porter Wagner Show and Walter Cronkite's voice would stop me dead in my tracks. There was something about her singing voice and his speaking voice that I was mesmerized. I was drawn to their voices. And it seems very weird to me sometimes that I ended up being a broadcaster who lives where Dolly Parton came from. But I've always been crazy about Dolly Parton, and it has nothing to do with the music. Her music's perfectly fine, but there's a million people that do really great music.
Yeah.
But just the way she has lived her life as the top of the top stars, but always been able to make fun of herself better than anybody else ever could. The way she's always done so much for other people, the way but at the same time, she doesn't shy away from the fact that she's great at what she does and she's proud of what she does, but she turns right around and uses all of that to make things better for people around her. So she would be the first. And it's funny because a very close second would be Mickey Hart, the drummer from the Grateful Dead. That would be my second choice if I could sit down and talk with somebody. But
pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, Dolly Parton is the best. I love Dolly Parton. I have like kids will have like stuffed animals or like dolls that they like have all the time. And so mine is my Dolly that I got at Dollywood when I was I don't even remember getting her, but I named her Dolly after Dolly.
See? So you're going to send her a copy of this, right?
And so
you're going to make
Dolly,
sure she has it.
Hear this.
There's two people that really need to talk to you.
I can't listen to Tennessee Mountain Home without crying. And I mean that. Like if it starts playing, like people have to change, like people make fun of me, they have to change it because I just cry because Dolly Parton's the best. I feel like no one asked, but if I had to pick someone, I would pick either Tyler Childers or Ricky Skaggs. Which I feel like is maybe an odd lineup, but I think those are the
and why those two?
I love Tyler Childers. I just love Tyler Childers. I love him so much. I just love his music, and I just love who he is as a person, and like his overcoming of like addiction and other things. I just think that his story is really inspiring. Ricky Skaggs, I just love Ricky Skaggs. I grew up, my dad was in a bluegrass band growing up, and so we listened to the Live at the Charleston album a lot, which is my favorite of all of his albums. Just recorded live at the Charleston, obviously, and still to this day, like I know, some of my favorite. Get Up John is like my favorite piece of music ever. It's like 10 minutes and it's just instrumental, but so good. I would love to meet Ricky Skaggs.
See, you need to invite him in.
So Ricky Skaggs, if you hear this.
The worst that can happen is they would say no.
That's what I'm saying. I might send them like college invites. Like, I'm graduating May 17th.
That's right.
If you guys aren't busy, love to see you there. That's right.
Love to see you there. And if you can stop by the building on the way.
I could interview you. I have a camera.
That's exactly right. See?
Awesome. Well, is that everything? Do you have anything else that you want to
We can talk about anything you want to talk about. I'm here for you. What else did we need to talk about?
Can you think of anything?
I mean, there's so much. I mean, this is so fun. Because it's not your typical job. Right? That when you think of military, I mean, my grandfather, he served in the Air Force, and he just put, missiles on jets, and that was his job. And so now, like, when I view the military Air Force, I'm thinking, oh, that's the Air Force that I grew up with, That's what I told. And now there's this other side of it that's way different. And so, I mean, you talked about this 4-year where you did these Christmas things. So what was the other years look like? Was it like just typical making like ads for recruiters? Was it like, what was just the general busyness of the day that you were doing?
Yeah, in that particular job, and I'll turn back to you to answer that because that'll look weird if I'm just staring at somebody who they can't see. But the idea is you've got a marketing division, and their job is to sell the Air Force, just like selling a car or selling French fries. They are selling the Air Force. So at one end of the hall in the recruiting Air Force headquarters building, you had a marketing team, you had photographers, you had writers, you had people who designed the swag that the Air Force recruiters gives out, you had people that booked you for attending conferences that had to do with media and things like that. And so while you're doing things like these country shows or recording spots for the recruiters, you were also very involved in what is trending right now. What is an 18 to 24-year-old person who is starting to look at their first career? Where do we go find that person? And that really plays a lot into what we were doing in those years in the early 90s, because most people don't realize that listening ears gravitate to many other things. And just at that particular moment, the biggest demographic musically for 18 to 24-year-old people was country music. Mm-hmm. So we always had kind of an ear on like, where are we putting this that people can hear it? But we were involved in what the brochures were going to look like. What was the swag going to look like that we handed out to people? And you learned a lot about advertising, but you also learned about, I used to call it the magic dust. How do we sell the magic dust? Because I'm not trying to sell you a car. I'm trying to convince you that all these things that you think you want to do in your life, the military probably has a way for you to get there. Yeah. And that's where you start to learn about those other things that you were talking about. If you picture any military branch, but I'll just go with Air Force because that's what I know. When you go into an Air Force base, it's like you drove into a small city. There's a fire department. There's a police department. There are people who build buildings. There's lawyers. There's doctors. There's nurses. There's people who cook food. There's people who run lodging facilities. All of these things are on a base. The difference is if you go for a job anywhere else, what's the first thing they want to know? How much experience do you have?
Yeah.
When you go to the military, they say, what do you want to do with your life? And then they show you how to get there.
Right.
And along the way, those other things that people feel like they need to be doing as a young adult, the putting you through college, the getting that OJT to make you a viable professional, well, that comes with those schools and those things that you learn. So what you were expressing is exactly what surprises people about the military, because they find out there's all these jobs that they never knew existed. And, you know, there are people that come and say, I've always wanted to cook. Great. You'll go work under 4th Support Squadron, and you'll work in the Services Division, and you'll learn to be a chef. You'll go to culinary school, and you'll learn to be a chef. Those kind of things that people never thought they could do, it's there. Yeah. There are people that just come in with not the first clue of what they want to do with their life. And so just like you take an ACT or an SAT, you take military tests, and they go, hey, based on what we're seeing here, you would be really good at this. And sometimes you find, in fact, we used to have an Air Force campaign where you see people taking what they did or what they loved on the outside and started doing it in the military. And the catch was, I found my place. This is where I needed to be. Yeah. So what you're expressing is exactly what a lot of people express when they come to the military. Is, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that place for me was there. And then they find something they're amazingly good at that no one ever told them they could do that. And so that was part of the fun of like, how do I sell that? That's not a product. That's your life. How do I sell you this whole new lifestyle to get you to do something? And yeah, it was fun. It was, it was a lot of work.
The military can be fun. That's awesome.
It really can. I mean, there's a lot of days that aren't fun too. I mean, don't get me wrong, but yeah.
So then how would you cater a certain ad or promotion to a regional versus like a national scene?
That's a tough one. Yeah. That's a tough one. And we never really tried to do that because one of the odd things about recruiting for the military is if you went in and joined today, it's going to take you 2 months to get through your basic training. It's going to take you anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years to get through all of your training to do your job. So when somebody comes into the military, they've already projected out, this is how long it's going to take you before you're actually doing the job. So what that means to a recruiter is this week, we know 2 years out, we need a lot of security forces people. We need cops. You come in 2 days later, they may say, you know what? We've got bonuses for forklift operators. We need civil engineers right now. So almost daily, the extended needs of the military changes. So when you're trying to fill a big picture global military force, it gets a little dicey if you start trying to chop that into, well, what does this region do or what does this region do? But the way you do approach that is not with the job, but where you go to find those people. Here, one of the best places to draw attention to what the Air National Guard is all about is at Country Music Fan Fest, right in the heart of Nashville. Our recruiters set up right in the middle of it, but it's not hard to figure out that in the middle of Country Music Fest, people don't really want to sit down and talk about their career. So they do things like pull-up competitions, and they have pull-up bars, and they have these different fun things. And while they're talking with people, you always get that, so what if I wanted to? And it's like, well, let's talk about it. What if I wanted to find a way to get through college? What if I wanted to find a way to be on an airplane? Because I think that'd be the coolest. And they're like, well, let's talk about it later. But in the Midwest and the North, things like snowmobile racing and all of these kind of things are perfect for military recruiters to go and hang out and do stuff. So it could be a county fair. It could be a neat sports event that's unique to that area. I saw a thing just the other day. There's a women's 3-on-3, I think, professional basketball league. And there was Air Force logos all around the side of it. So you can go, hey, look at that. They figured out there's a niche there, and that's what they're reaching for. So you do kind of regionalize it, but it's more like what are they doing as opposed to where they live. Yeah.
That's awesome. Right. Well, I can't think of anything else. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for meeting with us.
You're very welcome.
If you all haven't seen our original interview with Mr. Connor, you can go on our YouTube and find that in the archives. I think it was in 2023. I think in the fall. That could be wrong, but you'll find it. It is on the YouTube. So awesome. We just thank you so much for coming and following up with us. This has been
absolutely. It's always
so
fun
insanely awesome.
Well, you guys, I think what you're doing here, I hope more people find out about what your programs are about, how you're gathering these histories, because especially within the National Guard, you find so many people that their day-to-day job, they're your neighbors. These are people that you live and work with all the time. And sometimes you don't even know what they're doing for the military on the weekends or what they're doing in an extended job. Right. But sometimes what you think this person is doing for the military that would be like their regular job, it's something completely different. And I didn't say that very well, but what I mean is, for example, we used to have a guy that worked in our services division, and services can be people who cook, people who run lodging, people who would run a base gym. And I was just shooting the breeze with him one day, and I said, so what do you do when you're not out with us? And he said, I'm an airline pilot. And I went, wait a minute. Yeah. And he said, okay, let me stop you right there because I know what you're going to ask. He said, when I fly my airplane, I fly cargo. There's only one other person in the airplane at the most. I don't see people during the day. So when I come to do my guard time, I want to be around people. I want to be helpful. This is the way I give back to the community. And those are great stories. Those are stories that I wish more people would come out and do this with you, because I think it's an incredibly worthwhile program. And
absolutely. And
I hope more people will come out and take advantage of it, because Tennessee's got a lot of great stories, and
sure
I'm happy to come out and do this with you.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all.